Police in Toronto say they've solved a 50-year-old murder case using DNA evidence. Dale Manukduk takes us through how investigators put together the pieces and cracked the case.
She was living a life like any other teenager would at that time. And unfortunate circumstances ended in her death.
16-year-old Yvonne Leroux was last seen alive on November 29, 1972, near Oakdale Road and Finch Avenue West in North York. The day after, Leroux's body was discovered here in King Township along 16th Side Road between Jane and Keel Street, some 24 kilometers away from where she was last seen alive. Police say it was here where she was murdered, and her family has been searching for answers ever since. Generations of detectives worked on the case. Eventually, the trail went cold. $50,000 rewards were issued, and still nothing. But police never gave up, eventually turning to investigative genetic genealogy, or IGG, a tool that allowed them to match a 51-year-old DNA sample from the crime scene with genealogical databases. They found relatives, which led them to the person they believe killed Leroux.
We identified Yvonne's killer as Bruce Charles Cantillon. Bruce Cantillon was a 26-year-old who was living in Toronto at the time. He was known to police having committed several violent offenses against women.
Police say Cantillon had been incarcerated several times due to mental health issues. In 1974, 19 months after the murder, he took his own life. If he was alive today, he'd be facing a murder charge.
The relatives were cooperative. Extremely difficult for them as well, learning 51 years later that someone they knew had done something so horrible.
As for Leroux's family, they were notified last week. They've asked for privacy, but issued a statement, writing in part, "For over half a century, our family has wondered. Getting some answers will never change what happened or bring her back. We hope that more funding will become available for new advancements in DNA genealogy so that more grieving families can have some form of clarity." York Regional Police say they are applying IGG to several cold case investigations. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
My next guest has solved several cold case murders using genetic genealogy technology in Canada and in the U.S. Anthony Redgrave is a forensic genetic genealogist who joins me from Athol, Massachusetts. That is a mouthful. Anthony, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
So let's talk about, I want to talk about IGG. I also want to just get your reaction when you hear about a cold case like this kind of a murder being solved, this one in Toronto, and you hear that statement from the family and how it's so important even though it's 50 years later. What's your reaction when you hear about a case like this getting solved?
Just relief, for one. There's so many cases out there that need to be solved like this, and so many families waiting for answers and investigators who have devoted their entire careers to trying to get these cases solved. Utilizing new technology and being willing to try new things to get this done is just proving itself to be the way to get it done. And I feel so much relief and so much joy and so much, what's the word I'm looking for? Just mostly relief for the family and that they finally get any answer at all.
Yeah, you've had that personal relief because you were part of the team that helped solve the 1984 murder of a 9-year-old girl from Toronto. Tell us about how this kind of technology is used to solve cases like this. IGG, explain it if you can.
Sure. So, for example, if a person is an adoptee or doesn't know who one or both of their parents are, it works very similarly, the methodology. So you would take a DNA sample, upload it to a database, look at the list of matches who share any sort of genetic material with that sample, and find out how they relate to each other, and then it's a logic puzzle from there. The theory is that if 2 or more people with known ancestry descend from the same common ancestor, and then an unknown person shares DNA with them, they logically must descend from the same family. So that logic puzzle is done multiple times over until it starts connecting and leading down to a family or one individual that might be the source of that DNA.
When DNA evidence came into play, it was a game changer for police and for the courts in terms of solving cases. And now we seem to be seeing something, a similar sort of jump, if you will, in terms of IGG being that useful of a tool. Would you make that comparison in terms of the history of how police work and court cases go? How valuable this is?
Oh, absolutely. So the initial form of DNA evidence that was used, the STR testing, can be used to compare a suspect to DNA left at a crime scene. The big difference here is that forensic genetic genealogy can produce a suspect where there previously wasn't one, by following these genealogical clues down to where an individual might be, based on many relationships instead of just to themselves, their parents, or a full sibling. And that's really what's the big difference right now. It's a huge leap from what we used to be able to do before, and I really look forward to seeing so many more cases get solved this way.
I have about 30 seconds left, but I just have to ask you here, how long can these samples actually stay viable, these DNA samples?
They can stay viable for as long as the storage method allows. So if something is retrieved relatively recently from a scene, stored in a sealed container and refrigerated, it can kind of last indefinitely, as opposed to just being, in an envelope in a storage locker. But even then, that might be able to be used based on advances in lab technology that allows smaller samples to be worked. And it'll continue to improve, I'm sure. But generally, if there's any DNA evidence, anything could be possible.
Anthony Redgrave, a forensic genetic genealogist, thank you for your time.
Thank you.